I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, everybody's talking about the governor's race. And, well, they should, but we're going to go through some other races that will be on the ballot in 2014, just a few days away. So let's start with congressional races. There are two of them that are pretty interesting up here in the Panhandle. District number 2, Democrat Gwen Graham versus Republican incumbent Steve Sutherland.
Yeah, the Democrats nationally as well as in the state have focused heavily on this district. They see this as an opportunity for a pickup. Gwen Graham is the daughter of former governor and former U.S. Senator Bob Graham. Steve Sutherland has been elected twice in that district. It's kind of an interesting district because on the eastern end is Tallahassee, which is really Democratic stronghold, and then Sutherland, which is where Gwen Graham is from Tallahassee, and Steve Sutherland's from Panama City in the western part of the district, which is very conservative. So both parties nationally have put a ton of money into the race. This past weekend, Bill Clinton was in town in Tallahassee trying to help drive Democratic voters, particularly black voters, to go to the polls for Gwen Graham. It's one of the probably marquee races in the country at this point.
Go all the way down the state to Miami, and you've got in district number 26, you have the Democratic incumbent Joe Garcia versus the Republican challenger Carlos Curbelo. What's happening there?
Well, this is going to be a theme we'll probably talk about a lot. There's not a lot of really competitive races, but these two congressional races, though, District 2 and District 26, are very high profile, very competitive. Joe Garcia is a freshman Democratic congressman. He won last time by beating David Rivera, and Rivera is a Republican. Rivera's had a lot of ethical questions around him for years, as well as legal questions, and Garcia beat him in 2012. Carlos Curbelo is a Miami-Dade school board member. He's relatively young. I believe he's early to mid-30s, and I think he's viewed as sort of an up-and-comer down there. And they're saying that race as well as the District 2 and the Panhandle, those two races are pretty much toss-ups at this point.
And in a tight congressional year, that could be very important. Let's move to the Florida cabinet. The Attorney General's contest between incumbent Republican Pam Bondi and Democratic challenger George Sheldon.
Well, again, sort of a theme, there's not a lot of competitive races. If there is one competitive cabinet race, it is the Attorney General's race. Attorney General Bondi, though, has raised far more money than George Sheldon does, and she's got the wherewithal of the Republican Party behind her, which is very important with the support they can lend her. She also has good name recognition. George Sheldon's been around for a long time. He was a top deputy to former Attorney General Bob Butterworth, who is, in recent times been probably one of the most popular Democrats in the state. So Sheldon has a lot of contacts. He's got a lot of history with the Democratic Party. Most recently, he worked for the Obama administration in Washington. He had earlier served as Secretary of the Department of Children and Families here in Florida, and then he got a job in the Obama administration, but he came back to run for Attorney General. He won a primary, but he's been really hampered by not having much money. And it's hard to get your name on a statewide basis when you don't have money to run ads and you don't have a major infrastructure behind you.
Shows the power of name identification and the power of money in terms of building name ID.
Well, and that's rippling through races all over the state. I mean, think about how much money's been raised and spent in the governor's race, and we're still a week out. I mean, it's the money this year is just unbelievable.
All right, Chief Financial Officer, you have Republican incumbent Jeff Atwater versus Democrat challenger William Rankin.
There's not much of a race here. I mean, the Democratic Party in both the CFO race as well as the Agriculture Commissioner race basically has not put up viable candidates. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. These guys are unknown. They have.
All right, let's move to a minute. Agriculture Commissioner race, Adam Putnam, incumbent, Republican versus Democrat. Thad Hamilton.
Right.
We've not heard that name much either, have we?
Right, I'm sorry, jump ahead. But,
That's all right, but let's talk about it.
But, you know, the Democratic Party's basically conceded these races early on. I mean, it would take a miracle for them to win these two races.
But Jeff Atwater and Adam Putnam are acting like they've got serious challenges. They're both going across the state, meeting after meeting. They're putting up media. What's going on there?
Well, they are campaigning hard and they're raising a lot of money. I think the end game is that both of these guys are viewed as potential candidates for higher office in future elections. Both of them have been mentioned as possible candidates for governor in 2018 when their current cabinet terms would expire. The other thing that's out there that you know, I think it's going to become an issue to watch after this year's elections is whether Marco Rubio runs for re-election in 2016. He could run for president. There's been rumors he might be interested in sometime running for the governor. If he were to leave, or not run for re-election to the Senate, maybe Atwater or Putnam, I think probably it's more likely to be Atwater, might be interested in that race.
Okay, let's go to the state legislature. Again, with so many seats up, you'd think there'd be a lot of competitive races, but there really aren't. So let's go to the Senate first of all. The marquee race there is in District number 34 with Democratic incumbent Maria Sachs versus Republican challenger Ellen Bogdanoff. This is an important race in a couple of different ways. Let's talk about it.
Ellen Bogdanoff was in the Senate from 2010 to 2012, and then there was redistricting, and she and Maria Sachs got put in the same district, both of them incumbents. And it is a Democratic-leaning and Democratic-performing district. And Maria Sachs won in 2012, and Ellen Bogdanoff, the Republican, has come back and is seeking a rematch. It is a very hotly contested race. Like you said, for one thing, it's a rematch, so that in and of itself, turns up the pressure a little bit. But there's other issues here. If Bogdanoff could win, the Republicans would have a supermajority in the Senate, which is an inside baseball issue. But on the other hand, it becomes important for some procedural reasons, overrides of vetoes, those sorts of things. Also, there is again, sort of inside baseball, but Ellen Bogdanoff is very close to Senator Jack Latvala, who's trying to become Senate president in 2016. And
he's pouring a lot of support into that race.
He has a political committee that's been helping to fund some ads in support of Ellen Bogdanoff. There's, he's putting a lot of money into this race. They're very close personally, for one thing, but he also, if he can get her elected, that would help his chances of becoming Senate president in 2016. So there's some undercurrents here that go beyond the surface of this race being a rematch. There's some, interplay within the Senate itself.
All right, let's move to the Florida House. Let's go to some areas of the state. In the Orlando area, you have a couple of competitive races that people are watching. District number 29, you have a former member of the House, Scott Plakin, versus the Democratic incumbent Mike Clellan, and Plakin's making a big move there.
Probably the biggest shock of the 2012 election, legislatively at least, was that Mike Clellan beat Chris Dorworth, who was the incumbent representative in this district. This is a Seminole County district, which has been, it performs as a Republican district. It's pretty much been in Republican hands, at least in recent times. And Clellan beat Dorworth. Dorworth had some ethical problems, and Clellan kind of came out of nowhere and won that race very narrowly. Scott Plakin had been in the House, up until the 2012 election. But because of redistricting, he wound up running in a different district in 2012, basically to allow Dorworth to run in his district. Plakin wound up losing that race. Now he's coming back into this district, which is probably more truly his area that where his strength is, and he's running against Clellan. As I said, this is a Republican performing area, so I think the Republicans think that this is a real possibility to pick up this seat.
All right, let's move to District number 30. The Democratic incumbent is Karen Castor Dental versus Republican Bob Cortez. And again, this race is very tight.
Well, this is right next door to the Clellan-Plakin race. In fact, Karen Castor Dental is the one who beat Plakin in 2012. So this is a district that's it kind of straddles Seminole and Orange County lines, that area. Karen Castor Dental is a teacher, and she has a lot of support from the education community. She has raised a substantial amount of money. But you know, the Republicans are looking to try to unseat her. One thing that's also, again, sort of recurring theme through these races is that generally the Republicans are going after freshman Democrats. Clellan, Castor Dental, some of the other races we'll talk about later. These are Democrats who won races in 2012. Now they're up again, and the Republicans are putting their full financial as well as organizational might against them. Okay,
let's move to Tampa Bay. District number 63, Republican Sean Harrison, who was a representative, versus Democratic incumbent Mark Danish.
This is in some ways similar to the Bogdanoff-Sachs race. It's a rematch. Danish was not in the legislature before, but still, he unseated Sean Harrison last time in 2012, and Harrison's trying to regain that seat. Danish is a first-term Democrat, obviously. He is a teacher, and at this point, Harrison's raised more money than he has, and so again, this is another race that looks fairly competitive.
The whole area down there in Tampa Bay and in Orlando, it's a swing area and a lot of advertising going in there, so very unpredictable. Let's move to District number 65, Republican Chris Sproles versus Democratic incumbent Carl Zimmerman.
Yeah, this is kind of a North Pinellas district, and Zimmerman beat the incumbent. Zimmerman's Democrat. He beat the incumbent Republican in 2012. And Sproles, again, he's relatively young. He's kind of an up-and-comer. I think he's viewed as down there. He's trying to knock off Zimmerman. Again, it's sort of a recurring theme. We keep repeating it again and again. But Republicans generally have more money in these races, and the Democrats are trying to hold on to them.
And finally, in the Tampa Bay area, District 68, you've got Republican Bill Young, son of former longtime Congressman Bill Young, versus Democratic incumbent Dwight Dudley.
Yeah, Bill Young goes into this race with, as you said, his father was the congressman down there for 40 years, or roughly 40 years.
Speaking of name identification.
Yeah, speaking of name identification, and his father passed away last year. And he decided to run for this House seat. Dwight Dudley, this is a generally Democratic performing district. I think it leans Democratic just in its nature. Dudley in 2012, beat Frank Farkas, who's a former state representative, who was trying to make a comeback in 2012, and Dudley beat him. The major issue down there in that whole race was Duke Energy. Dudley ran against Duke Energy essentially, and in a lot of ways, I think they're trying to do that again this year.
It's still an issue, right?
There's nuclear costs and these issues that they're hot button down there, and Dudley, that was the centerpiece of his campaign in 2012, and it's popping up in various races down there again this year.
And finally, we'll move south to Miami, a couple of hotly contested races there. District number 112, the Democratic incumbent Jose Javier Rodriguez versus Republican challenger Daniel Diaz-Leyva.
Yeah, both of these guys have raised a bunch of money, more than $300,000 apiece just for their campaign accounts. That doesn't take into consideration outside money just pouring into these races. Jose Javier Rodriguez, it was an open seat in 2012. He defeated Alex Diaz de la Portilla, who was a former senator, was trying to make a comeback in 2012. Rodriguez defeated him. He's an attorney, and he, it was sort of an interesting Democratic pickup in areas that, traditionally had been more Republican. Daniel Diaz-Leyva has raised, as I said, a ton of money, seems to have a lot of the Republican infrastructure behind him. And so I think everybody's thinking this race is going to be pretty close.
And finally, down in Miami again, Miami area, district number 114, where you have the Republican incumbent, Eric Fresen. Many would have assumed he would be completely safe, but he's in a competitive race with Democrat Daisy Baez.
This is one of those races where it's kind of emerged, I think, to people recently. Fresen is he's an incumbent. He's been around for, I think he's maybe going on his 4th term if he gets elected. But all of a sudden, he has started raising a ton of money, and there's some talk out there that he may be in trouble, or at least the race may be getting close. Daisy Baez has raised a significant amount of money for a Democrat non-incumbent, and the word is she's working hard, and that this race could be closer than what a lot of people, including me, would have thought several months ago.
Thank you, Jim. We'll wait and see, won't we, with the rest of Florida and the nation. For more news about Florida politics and government, visit the Advances section of our website.